I'll never forget the sound of his voice cutting through the laughter that had filled the hall only moments earlier. The reunion had been alive with chatter, cousins swapping stories, uncles clinking glasses, and my parents smiling as though we were one big happy family. For a brief second, I almost believed it. But then my brother stood up, his face twisted with disdain, and the air shifted. "You don't deserve a place in this family," he shouted, his words slicing deeper than any knife could. The room went silent. I felt every pair of eyes turn to me, some wide with shock, others narrowed with judgment, a few hiding smirks they didn't want me to see. My throat closed up. My palms grew damp. In that frozen moment, I wanted the ground beneath me to open up and swallow me whole. I tried to muster a response, but my voice betrayed me. All I could manage was a whisper, trembling with hurt. "Why would you say that?" He sneered, the kind of sneer that told me he had been waiting for this moment. "Because you were never really one of us. Everyone knows it. You don't belong here. You never did." Gasps rippled through the room. My mother pressed her hand to her mouth, but she didn't say a word. My father looked away, his jaw tight. No one stood up for me. No one told him to stop. I felt stripped bare, as if every sacrifice I had ever made, every desperate attempt to be accepted, had been erased in a single sentence. Tears burned behind my eyes, threatening to spill, but I clenched my fists at my sides, refusing to give him the satisfaction of watching me break. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out the whispers circling the room. I could feel the weight of my family's silence crushing me more than his words ever could. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But instead, I just stood there, trembling, with every breath a battle. And as his words echoed in the stunned silence, I realized this was no passing insult. It was a declaration of war. But I had no idea that his cruel words were only the beginning. Growing up in my family always felt like living in the shadow of a brighter, louder star. My brother was the golden child, the one who seemed to carry the sun in his pocket. From the moment he was born, everyone adored him. Relatives crowded around his crib, neighbors praised his every step, and teachers called him gifted. I, on the other hand, was just there. Present, but unnoticed, like the faded wallpaper in the background of a perfect photograph. At first, I didn't question it. I thought that was just how things were supposed to be. He was older, more confident, and he had a charm that drew people in effortlessly. But as I grew older, I began to notice the differences in how we were treated. When he brought home a grade barely passing, my parents laughed it off, saying, "That's just him, always too smart for school." But when I brought home straight A's, the response was a flat, "Good, that's what we expect from you." I worked harder, thinking that maybe if I just pushed myself enough, they'd see me too. I joined clubs, stayed up late studying, even skipped hanging out with friends so I could achieve more, hoping someone, anyone, would notice. But the recognition never came. My achievements were brushed aside, as if they were nothing more than dust compared to my brother's loud laughter and easy charm. The comparisons became my constant companion. Why can't you be more like him? Look at how everyone loves your brother. You're too quiet, too serious, too different. Those words burrowed into me, planting seeds of doubt I carried everywhere. No matter what I did, I was always second best, and yet deep down all I wanted was love. Not the kind of shallow praise that fades after applause, but a steady, unconditional love that told me I belonged. I tried to earn it, through perfect grades, good behavior, endless sacrifices, but it never came. Instead, criticism became my lullaby. Silence my reward. I remember one night vividly. I was about 12, sitting at the kitchen table with my homework spread out. I had just won a regional essay contest, something I thought might finally make them proud. I placed the certificate carefully on the table, waiting for their reaction. My mother barely glanced at it before turning to my brother, who was bragging about making the basketball team. Her face lit up, pride shining in her eyes. My father clapped him on the back, their laughter filling the room. And me? I quietly folded the certificate and slipped it into my school bag, unseen and forgotten. Moments like that stacked up until they became the foundation of my life. Silent victories, invisible milestones, unshared joys. My brother basked in the spotlight, while I learned to live in the dark corners, telling myself that maybe, one day, they would see me. But nothing I did could shift the balance. The favoritism was woven into the very fabric of our family. I was the afterthought, the background character in a story that never seemed to include me. And though I carried the hurt quietly, the cracks inside me deepened with every passing year. Still, nothing prepared me for what happened when secrets began to unravel. My brother wore arrogance like a crown, and everyone in our family bowed to it. From the outside, he looked like the perfect son, confident, charismatic, effortlessly, charming, but I knew the truth. I had seen the way he twisted words, the way he spun lies until people believed them, and the way he manipulated every situation to keep himself shining, while I faded further into the background. He was a master of appearances. At reunions, he would glide from one relative to another, shaking hands, making jokes, remembering small details about their lives just to earn their admiration. He knew how to charm a crowd, and our family adored him for it. "He's such a natural leader," my uncle once said proudly. "He'll go far in life." I wanted to scream, because I knew that behind those smiles, he was crueler than anyone could imagine. When we were kids, he would borrow my toys and return them broken, then convince our parents that I had ruined them myself. I'd be scolded while he walked away smirking. When we were teenagers, he spread rumors about me at school, whispering lies to friends who soon turned cold. I confronted him once, asking why he hated me so much. His answer still haunts me. "Because I can," he said, eyes glittering with satisfaction. Greed seemed to fuel him. Whatever he wanted, he got. And not just because our parents gave in, but because he made sure no one else stood in his way. If I saved money to buy something for myself, he'd find a way to take it. If I tried to share an accomplishment, he'd interrupt with a louder story of his own. Every step I took forward, he shoved me 2 steps back. And my parents? They didn't just ignore it, they enabled it. They excused every cruel action as if it were harmless mischief. "He's just teasing," they'd say when I cried. "Don't be so sensitive." When he lied, they defended him. When he succeeded, they celebrated him. When he failed, they forgave him instantly. I was never offered the same grace. If I faltered, I was criticized. If I succeeded, I was compared. If I cried, I was told to toughen up. The injustice burned inside me, but I swallowed it down, because speaking up only made things worse. My silence became his weapon. He used it to paint me as weak, unworthy, invisible. And the more invisible I became, the louder his voice grew in the family's story. There were nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if maybe he was right. Maybe I didn't deserve a place in the family. Maybe I was destined to always be less. But deep down, a small voice inside me whispered that truth doesn't hide forever. Lies can dazzle for a while, but sooner or later, they collapse under their own weight. My brother didn't believe that. He thought he could manipulate reality forever. And with every lie he told, with every cruel smirk, he climbed higher in the family's esteem. They saw him as the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. I watched as their pride in him grew, while my existence shrank. And yet, the higher he rose in their eyes, the deeper I sank in silence. Life has a way of testing you, and for me, the tests never seemed to stop. While my brother sailed through life with doors opening for him at every turn, I was the one pushing against walls that never seemed to move. I worked harder than anyone around me, yet no matter how much I sacrificed, the rewards were always small, and the recognition from my family was non-existent. After college, when my friends were landing jobs in shiny offices, I had to juggle two part-time positions just to pay rent. I worked mornings at a grocery store and nights cleaning offices. My body ached constantly, but I told myself it was worth it, because one day I'd prove I was just as capable, maybe even more, than the brother they worshipped. Every paycheck I earned was a badge of survival, though no one in my family cared to notice. When I finally scraped enough money together to go back to school, I thought it would change everything. I enrolled in classes, studied late into the night, and earned certifications that should have been stepping stones to better opportunities. And yet, whenever I proudly mentioned it at family gatherings, their eyes would glaze over. But when my brother bragged about a promotion, even one he didn't fully earn, they applauded as if he had built an empire. The imbalance gnawed at me. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that love isn't measured by applause, but the silence hurt more than I ever admitted. There were times I would sit alone in my apartment, staring at the walls, tears streaming down my face, whispering to myself, why am I never enough? Even when I tried to share small victories, paying off a debt, landing a contract, overcoming a health scare, they brushed it aside. My mother once cut me off mid-sentence to ask my brother about his new car. My father nodded absently when I explained how I had managed to pull myself through a rough financial patch, only to beam moments later when my brother joked about a bonus check. It wasn't just financial struggles either. I battled exhaustion, stress, and even a period of poor health that left me bedridden for weeks. Still, I dragged myself up, determined to keep going. I told myself that maybe perseverance itself would earn their respect. But when I showed up to a family dinner pale and thin, my brother made a joke about how I looked like I was starving, to be noticed. Laughter echoed around the table, and I felt my chest tighten with shame. Despite the cruelty, despite the rejection, I never stopped loving my family. That was my greatest weakness, and my greatest strength. I wanted their approval, but I also wanted their happiness. I defended them to others, even when they didn't defend me. I sent gifts for birthdays I wasn't invited to. I checked in when they were sick, and I celebrated their victories silently, even when mine went ignored. But love is heavy when it's one-sided. My heart grew weary from carrying it alone. There were nights I'd bury my face in my pillow and sob until I was numb, the sound muffled so no one could hear. By morning, I'd wash my face, paste on a smile, and tell myself to keep going. My silence became my shield. If I didn't fight back, maybe things wouldn't get worse. Maybe peace was better than justice. Yet, deep inside, the war raged on. I longed to be seen, to be valued not as a shadow but as a person who mattered. I thought if I just endured, if I just proved my worth through hard work and patience, the truth would one day speak louder than his lies. I thought my silence was strength, but my brother was waiting to destroy me completely. When the invitation to the family reunion arrived, I stared at it for days before making a decision. Part of me wanted to tear it up, throw it away, and pretend it never came. Why should I walk into a room where I was only ever treated like a stranger? But another part of me, a stubborn, hopeful piece of my heart, whispered that maybe this time would be different. Maybe after all the years of silence, struggle, and sacrifice, someone would finally see me. I bought a modest outfit, nothing flashy, but neat enough to show I cared. As I stood in front of the mirror that morning, I practiced my smile, trying to hide the nervous energy twisting in my stomach. You can handle this, I told myself. Just hold your head high. The moment I arrived, though, the doubts returned. My brother was already there, moving through the crowd like a king holding court. He spotted me instantly, and his smirk told me he had been waiting. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," he said loudly enough for those nearby to hear. Laughter rippled among a few cousins. I forced a smile, pretending the jab didn't sting, and moved past him. Throughout the evening, the insults continued. Subtle at first, disguised as jokes. He commented on my clothes, remarking that I must have finally saved enough to afford something decent. He laughed about my career, calling it cute compared to his so-called successes. At one point, when I poured myself a drink, he leaned close and whispered, "Careful, don't spill. It's probably the most expensive thing you've touched all year." The worst part wasn't his words, though. It was the family's response. My parents chuckled uncomfortably, but said nothing. Aunts and uncles turned away, pretending not to hear. Cousins exchanged whispers, their eyes darting toward me before quickly looking down. No one defended me. No one told him to stop. Their silence screamed louder than his cruelty. I tried to distract myself with small conversations, clinging to polite smiles, but everywhere I turned, I felt the weight of their complicity. It was as if the entire room had agreed on one unspoken truth. I didn't belong. Still, I held on to hope. I told myself if I just stayed calm, if I just endured, the night would pass without incident. Maybe I could slip out quietly and pretend none of it had happened. But as the hours dragged on, I could feel the tension building, like a storm gathering just beyond the horizon. My brother's eyes followed me with every step, his smirk widening, his voice rising, as though he was preparing for something bigger, something final, and I was right. Because then, in front of everyone, he crossed the line. The night had reached that restless lull when the plates were cleared and the music softened. When conversations grew louder and the weight of too much food and too much drink began to settle. I was standing near the corner, half hidden, clinging to a glass of water as though it could shield me. My brother, of course, had claimed the center of attention, spinning one of his exaggerated stories, his audience hanging on every word. Then his eyes landed on me, and I felt it before he even opened his mouth. Something dangerous flickered in his gaze. He cleared his throat dramatically, raising his voice above the chatter. "You know," he said, pointing straight at me, "it's funny that we even let you show up here tonight." The room stilled. Every head turned toward me, and the spotlight I had never wanted burned hot on my skin. My brother took a step closer, his grin sharp, his tone mocking. "Because, let's be honest, you don't really belong here, do you?" A nervous laugh broke from one of the cousins, quickly silenced by the weight of his words. My heart pounded. I opened my mouth to reply, but nothing came. My tongue felt heavy, my throat dry. He didn't stop. He thrived on the silence, the way people leaned in, waiting for the next blow. "All my life," he continued, "I've carried this family's name with pride. I've made them proud. But you're just extra, like some guest who never left." I heard the whispers ripple through the room, the shifting of chairs, the sharp intake of breath from someone behind me. My mother's hand hovered in the air as though she wanted to stop him, but she didn't. My father's jaw clenched, but he remained seated, silent. Tears stung my eyes, but I swallowed them down. I tried to steady my voice, to keep it from shaking. "Why are you doing this?" I asked quietly, the words barely audible. "Why?" he repeated, laughing coldly. "Because everyone's been pretending for far too long. It's time the truth came out." He looked around the room, enjoying the suspense he had built. "You're not even one of us. You're not blood. You never were." The words hit me like a physical blow. Gasps erupted, and someone dropped a glass, the shattering echoing through the hall. I felt the floor tilt beneath me, my vision blurring. My chest tightened, each breath shallow, ragged. For years, I had buried that secret deep inside, praying it would never surface. And now, in one cruel moment, he had dragged it into the open for everyone to see. My voice cracked as I finally found the strength to speak. "How dare you?" My hands trembled, my whole body shaking with rage and shame. "This is not your truth to tell." But he only smiled wider, feeding on my pain. "Oh, come on. Did you really think no one knew? They've all whispered about it behind your back. You were never really family, just someone our parents took in out of pity. And you've been clinging on ever since, desperate for scraps of attention." I scanned the room, searching the faces of the people who had raised me, loved me, or at least pretended to. Some looked away, unable to meet my eyes. Others stared with curiosity, as if I had suddenly become a stranger to them. The silence was deafening, heavier than his accusations. My knees buckled, and I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. For so long, I had endured his cruelty, thinking it was only jealousy or arrogance. But this was different. This was an execution, and my family were the silent witnesses. I wanted to scream, to tell him to shut up, to make him choke on the poison he was spewing. But a part of me knew it was too late. The words were out, and they could never be unsaid. My chest heaved as I finally looked him in the eye, my voice shaking but louder now. "You think this makes you strong? You think exposing me makes you better? All it shows is how cruel you are." His laugh rang out, hollow and cruel. "Cruel? No, I'm just being honest. I'm saying what everyone else is too polite to admit. You've never been one of us, and deep down you know it." The crowd shifted uneasily, murmurs spreading like wildfire. I could see relatives exchanging looks, curiosity mingled with discomfort. And still, no one spoke in my defense. No one reached out a hand to shield me. Their silence was its own betrayal. I felt something inside me crack, not just from his words, but from the confirmation that no one would stop him. I had always believed my family's love was flawed but real. In that moment, I realized it was conditional, fragile, and perhaps never truly mine. And yet, even as I stood there, shaking and humiliated, a fire began to burn inside me. Maybe it was anger, maybe it was survival, but I knew I couldn't let him be the only one with a voice. My lips parted, my throat raw, but the words rose anyway. "If I don't belong here," I said, my voice trembling yet steadying with each word, "then why is it me who has sacrificed the most for this family? Why is it me who has always been there when you weren't?" A hush fell. My brother's smirk faltered, just for a second, and in that hesitation, I felt the shift, the moment when truth began clawing its way to the surface, unstoppable. Because no matter how deeply I had buried it, no matter how long I had tried to protect everyone from it, there was a truth inside, me that had waited too long to be heard. And in that moment, the truth I had buried for years could no longer stay hidden. The room felt frozen, as though the air itself had thickened. My brother's words still echoed, bouncing off the walls, ricocheting in my chest. Relatives whispered in clusters, their voices low, filled with curiosity, disbelief, and a hint of judgment. I could feel their eyes on me, some sympathetic, some confused, some perhaps realizing for the first time that they had overlooked so much. But no one came close. No one offered comfort. No hand reached out to steady me. Their silence was deafening. I stumbled toward the exit, my legs trembling beneath me, each step heavy with humiliation. The cool air outside the hall hit my face, but it did nothing to soothe the burning shame that had settled deep within. I kept walking, my hands buried in my pockets, my head bowed, trying to make sense of what had just happened. How could someone I had grown up with, someone I had shared childhood memories with, treat me like a stranger before the very people I loved? As I walked away, memories surfaced, sharp and vivid. I remembered the nights I had stayed awake helping. My brother with school projects he barely cared about, offering guidance only to be ignored. I remembered the times I had worked extra hours to send birthday gifts, the sacrifices I had made so my family could feel proud, the countless small acts of love that had gone unnoticed. Every meal I had prepared, every secret I had kept, every comforting word I had offered. They seemed meaningless now, overshadowed by a single public declaration of my outsider status. The storm inside me raged on. Part of me wanted to shout, to reveal the truth, to confront the lies, to demand acknowledgement for every effort I had made. Another part urged me to remain silent, to retreat, to preserve whatever dignity I could from the wreckage. I couldn't decide which was stronger, the need for justice or the fear of being dismissed again. As I wandered the streets, my emotions twisted together. Anger, grief, shame, and a deep, aching loneliness. The city lights blurred as tears filled my eyes, and I wondered if I had been wrong to hope, wrong to expect love from a family that seemed incapable of giving it to me. I questioned who I really was. If I wasn't truly one of them, then what did that make me? Just a shadow of the family they claimed to love, an intruder in my own life story. Yet even in the midst of despair, a quiet clarity began to emerge. I realized that my identity, my worth, was not defined by their approval. Every sacrifice I had made, every moment of care I had offered, had been genuine. My love, my loyalty, my perseverance, those were mine, unshakable, undeniable. My brother could cast aspersions. The family could whisper behind my back, but they could never erase the truth of my own heart. I remembered all the times I had been there when no one else was, all the quiet acts that went unnoticed. I had carried their burdens, soothed their fears, celebrated their achievements, and hidden my own pain to protect them. And now, even if they refused to see me, even if they sided with him in this moment of cruelty, those memories were mine, alone. They were proof that I had loved fiercely, unconditionally, despite being rejected. I stopped on the curb, staring at the empty street ahead. The night felt endless, but in that darkness, I began to understand something vital. Shame belonged not to the one who had given everything and been humiliated, but to the one who had chosen cruelty, manipulation, and lies. And then it hit me, sharp and undeniable. The world had tried to paint me as the outsider, the intruder, the one who didn't belong. But in truth, I wasn't the one who should have been ashamed. It was days later when the truth finally came out, and the weight of years of uncertainty began to shift. The family gathered again, this time in a quieter, less celebratory setting. My father cleared his throat, eyes steady but heavy with the burden of years. "There's something everyone needs to know," he began, and I felt a flutter of apprehension in my chest. He told them everything. How I had been adopted after my mother passed, how he and my stepmother had taken me in out of love and responsibility, how they had never intended to treat me differently, how circumstances and misunderstandings had allowed my brother's arrogance to dominate their perception. Every word cut through the tension, clarifying the past, exposing hidden truths, and slowly unraveling the web of deception my brother had spun. The room went silent. I watched as my brother's smug expression faltered for the first time. The faces of my relatives shifted as well. Shock, confusion, and finally recognition dawning across their features. They had witnessed his cruelty firsthand, his manipulation, and his relentless pursuit to make me feel small. And now, in the light of the truth, his actions could no longer be excused or ignored. I took a deep breath, letting the anger and shame of the past days settle. This wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity, about seeing what had always been true, that I had given more of myself than anyone else, that I had loved fiercely and sacrificed silently while he had thrived on arrogance and entitlement. My dignity, which had been stripped away so publicly, was beginning to return piece by piece. My family began to speak, hesitant at first, acknowledging the ways my brother had undermined me, the moments they had ignored, the acts of love I had shown without ever asking for recognition. Apologies were murmured, quiet but sincere, and I allowed them to enter, understanding that while they could not erase the past, acknowledgement mattered. Through it all, I realized the deepest lesson of all: family is not defined by blood alone. It is defined by love, loyalty, and sacrifice. It is measured by the care we give, the support we offer, and the strength to forgive when the world has failed us. I had always embodied those qualities, even when no one else could see them. And in that moment, I finally understood that I had never been weak or insignificant. I had simply been patient, enduring a storm that would eventually reveal the truth. My brother remained in the room, his confidence shattered, though not entirely gone. I looked at him and felt no need for anger. The truth itself was a punishment greater than any I could deliver. I had endured his cruelty, but I had also endured with dignity, and that, in itself, was triumph. As the gathering dispersed, I felt a sense of release, a quiet pride that had nothing to do with approval or recognition. I had survived. I had loved. I had held my head high even when the world had tried to convince me otherwise. But even with the truth revealed, one question still haunted me. Sitting alone that night, long after the family had gone home, I let the events of the reunion wash over me. The humiliation, the whispered judgments, the cruel laughter. It all seemed like a distant storm now, fading into memory. What had once felt like an unbearable weight had transformed into clarity. I had faced rejection, betrayal, and ridicule, yet I had also survived, and in surviving, I had discovered a deeper truth about love, family, and myself. The reunion had been meant to highlight my outsider status, to expose my perceived weakness in front of everyone I had ever cared about. My brother had intended to humiliate me, to strip away any sense of belonging I had fought so hard to claim. But instead, it became the stage for revelation, an unveiling of truths he had tried to bury, and of a strength I had carried quietly for years. What he thought would destroy me only highlighted the loyalty, sacrifice, and love I had consistently offered, even when it was ignored. I reflected on the sacrifices I had made, the nights spent comforting my brother when no one else would, the personal dreams I set aside to support family needs, the countless small acts of care and dedication that had gone unnoticed. I realized that those sacrifices were never in vain. They were proof of who I was, not proof of my failures. I had loved not for recognition, but because it was my nature to do so, and that love had never gone unnoticed by the one person who mattered most: me. The family's perception had shifted in the wake of the truth. My brother's arrogance and manipulation were finally visible to those who had enabled him, and I could see the hesitation, the guilt, the dawning comprehension in their eyes. For the first time, I was recognized not as the outsider, but as a person whose worth was measured by actions, integrity, and love, rather than birthright or appearances. In that moment, I understood something essential. True family isn't about entitlement or bloodlines. It isn't about favoritism, inheritance, or social standing. Family is measured by the depth of care, the willingness to sacrifice, the courage to forgive, and the capacity to see beyond mistakes and flaws. It is defined by truth, love, and loyalty. The things I had always possessed, even when no one else seemed to notice. And as I finally allowed myself to breathe, to let go of the hurt and resentment that had lingered for so long, I felt a peace I had never known. I realized that my worth had never depended on approval from those who sought to diminish me. I had survived, endured, and loved fiercely. And that was enough. In the end, I realized I never needed his approval. Because the truth had already set me free.